Good morning, everybody. So you might be noticing that things are looking a little different today. Sorry for the glare. We are on location in the garage to do painting. So I tried as best I could. There we go. Good enough. So on location here in the garage to do painting. Decided today to do some spray painting to show y'all how that would work out. And also have our template all cut out. I uploaded the updated template to the GeekForge website. I made the letters bigger and also added little strips. I'll show you. So now it's larger, and these letters down here are larger, which will make them easier, and also they have the little bits so that you can keep all the pieces connected. Sorry, the garage has a whole different set of noises that the craft room does not. So this is a fun experiment, because it's all fun experiments, right? But to start with, we first have to not ruin the other projects that are in here. So the first thing is that I finished priming the shield, and I put two coats of black acrylic paint down. So the reason is that just like our picture, we want it to be black on the sides and silver in the middle. So I went ahead and painted the whole thing black, and then we will use the silver for the parts that are not taped off. So what I've done is I took some regular painter's tape and just did strips. And I left one piece undone so you can sort of see how I do that. And this is what, 6 strips of the inch. I think this is an inch thick painter's tape, and just lay one slightly overlapping the other. We don't want any gaps because we don't want any overspray to get into any gaps. So if you have thicker, like wider painter's tape, that's perfect. I did for our viewport, I made the width the same side on both sides by using the width of the painter's tape that I'm using. So it'll look uniform when it's done. So I'm going to put my last strip of painter's tape here on this edge, and then we'll be ready to start painting. Now, you can't really see it because of the way that I have the secondary camera positioned, but we do have 2 fans that are going to be opposite directions. There you can see them. So when we're done painting, we're going to turn on those 2 fans, and the cross breeze is going to make our paint dry more quickly. And that's also going to help when we're doing our stenciling later. So go ahead and put this last piece of tape on, and then we will start with our painting. It's very exciting. Paint day is always a fun day. So I don't know how well y'all are going to be able to see this because it's on the far side of the camera, but what I do is I get a lead of about 6 inches or so of my tape, and I'm going to line it up with the edge. So the edge is less important for this particular project, the outer edge, because we're going to cover it with the fabric, with the leather trim, fake leather trim. Yeah, so I line it up with the foam edge and then make sure that it covers the other piece of tape. And then roll it out 6 to 8 inches at a time and just sort of lightly press down. You don't have to press down really hard. We're just trying to create a barrier so the paint doesn't get through. Just like that. And then I'll take my fingers and just go back across. And now we're done. So now we have taped up both sides of the shield that we want to remain black. So basically we primed it with our gesso, and then we put down our main color, which is black. And as you can see, the part that we're going to paint, it's got a couple of color streaks in it, and that's going to give it some texture and we can always put more paint on top of it later. That's the best part about paint. So I'm going to be using this Rust-Oleum metallic silver because it does give it kind of a silver look. Because I wanted this to look less like foam and more like some sort of metal or composite. Because the black sides are going to be super matte, and then this is going to be shiny. And then when we seal it, we'll put a coat on top of it, and that will take some of the shine of this out as well. So let's go ahead. I want to make sure my fans are in the right position. Right, so we're not going to turn them on yet. The fans are just off screen of this. And yeah, y'all can see it in the other view. So we're going to start by our safety first. Get our mask. Respirators are great for this, or an N95 mask is really good. I'm in an enclosed garage. And so it does not have a ventilation system right now per se, like it doesn't have a hood. So I have to be careful if you're working with fumes to make sure you've got good ventilation. So since it's a garage, it's not perfectly sealed, but I also don't have the door open. So gotta get my mask. So now that we're all masked up, we can start with our spray paint. So the first coat of this, I'm just going to try and do an even back and forth, even across where the viewfinder is, which is why we haven't put the plastic in yet. All right, that's our first coat. Nice and easy. Now we're going to turn on our fans. Well, we'll turn on one of them because the other one's not plugged in. So, something I probably should have checked beforehand, but that's okay. Well, we've got one fan going. Oh, I have an extension cord. So here you go. This is exciting television, right? There we go. So it is drying fairly quickly because we've got the fans going. And now that we have the second fan, that will help as well. So it's already mostly dry. So we got a couple of spots. This spot right here is still wet. Everything else is almost completely dry already. So it's a benefit to having a paint station like this. And again, these are just 2 floor fans. You could use box fans. You really use anything to just try and get the air to go. And if you're super fancy, you can do 3 or 4 fans and have them from all sides. But 2 is perfect for art purposes in our day-to-day crafting lives and for this project. So it looks like everything is all dry already. It took me longer to find the extension cord than for this paint to dry using these fans. So we're going to turn it off. and we're going to do the second coat. So as you can see, we've got a couple of spots, got some fingerprints from where I was testing to see if paint was dry, from the base coat, not from this coat. So we're going to do a couple more layers of the silver to get it nice and shiny, and it should forgive our brush strokes. And if not, then the coating layer should take care of that. So round number 2. And this is just a Rust-Oleum paint and primer, silver metallic. It's got a silver lid in it. I have a hair from the chip brush that's in the paint. So let's see if we can get that out of there. Well, it was a good try while it lasted. That'll teach me to test the laws of physics. All right, there we go. Now that is on a nice solid surface, which I should have done in the first place, but you know. This is how we learn. Yes, it's definitely a chaos sort of thing, but it's live, you know, live TV. So there we go. We currently only have one cat in the house, and she's not really allowed in the craft room. Let's see. You were doing fine. There you go. There we go. All right. Also, the Wi-Fi, not as good in the garage as it is in the craft studio. So, all right. So I took the hair out and move this down so you can see. Maybe there's a little blip because the paint covered the hair. So I just took the back of my fingernail and was able to sort of flatten it. So when we do our next pass of paint, that we'll be able to cover that up. So I just want to double check, because you do your own tech support, and that's how it goes. Awesome. Okay. Okay, perfect. Threads and brushes everywhere. Okay, so we're gonna take now we're gonna take our second. Yes, Tom does a great job for Rem. Tom does the tech for it, and it's really nice to have somebody doing it for you. So, second coat. And I'm just doing short, so we'll call it a medium pressure, and short little back and forths, maybe 3 inches. That'll give us our fullest level of coverage with the most control. So when we're painting with the acrylic brush and we're trying to cover a large surface, using big broad strokes is perfect. And for this, to make sure that we get the concentration of color and spray that we want, we do shorter strokes. All right, that looks pretty good. So turn our fans back on. And now we wait and see how long this takes to dry. You'll get to a point that you realize that, you know, there's not going to be anything else that you can do. Now, if you messed up a layer, let's say, and you were trying to correct the mistake, you can take a really fine grit sandpaper, sand it down, and then wipe it off so there's no dust, and then paint again. But for something like this, since we didn't sand our, so I didn't sand the base black layer, right? And that would be the place to start, is to make sure that that's as smooth as you want it, and then layer up from there. So it is possible to get a really, really smooth finish, but like really, really fine grit sandpaper, 400 and above, is where you're gonna want to be for sanding down paint, especially on something like foam, because it's not delicate, but for things like sanding, it is delicate. Not as much as like if you were gonna sand a 3D printed piece and you were gonna sand that smooth, that it can take a little bit more of the sandpaper than the foam can, because the foam will you'll eventually get down to the foam, and then you'll have to patch that. So the short answer is not really, but there are other things you can do depending on what the scenario is. Like no amount of paint or sanding is going to take out our little divot down here. So that's something that we have to sort of work around. But with this particular project, because we're going to make this look like it's been beat up and that it's been used, that having some imperfections is a perfect way to then take our sandpaper and get it back down to that layer, that base layer of black, to make it look like it got scuffed and the paint got chipped and all that sort of stuff. So it's easier when you have the freedom to be able to make those decisions and to do those things than if you're trying to match a source material, in my opinion. So let's go check and see how our paint is. So it's dry down here. It's all dry. That was 3 minutes. So it took 3 whole minutes with my 2 floor fans to dry that second layer of spray paint. So, and now we're starting to get a couple of, so you can see the spots where it looks kind of, see if I can get it without blinding you. So we've got these spots here where it's starting to fill in some of the brush strokes. So we'll go for another, probably 2 layers. and see if we can get that really sort of flat surface. Now this spray paint that I'm using is also a primer, so it does contain filling agents in it, which would be different than if it was just a regular spray paint, which is part of the reason that I used this particular paint, is that it, because it's got that primer element in it, that it's also very forgiving. So let's go for another layer and see what we can do. So I don't know how well y'all can see, probably not at all. So there is a little bit of paint that's kind of pooling because I purposefully oversprayed so that we could see what that looked like. Basically what happens is that the paint gets to a saturation level and the surface doesn't accept any more paint. And then you're just moving around the paint that's already on there, especially with the spray paint. So using a brush, you don't really have that challenge because you can move the brush, use the brush to move the paint. But when you're spraying, that the propellant in the spray paint is what's pushing the paint out. So I've got a spot here that I kept spraying, and so it's made this sort of ripply sort of pooling effect. So I just wanted to show you kind of what that looked like and how we can fix that. And even when it's dry, it's still got some reflectiveness on it. So this part is still damp. And the more paint you put on it, the longer it is going to take to dry. So as we're starting to put thicker layers on, that's also going to present some challenges. And the other bonus to, it's true, I'm all branded up today. The other bonus to doing the fans is that you can also capture any of those paint imperfections very quickly because it's not drying like normal. So we've got a couple of spots that still are still drying. Up here is where it's sort of oversprayed. And then this part here is dry and it's starting to get a really nice reflective surface to it. So while this is drying, I will show you the other thing. And I talked about it a little bit earlier, but I redid the template, and for the sake of time, I used my cutting machine and didn't scale it quite right. So that is on me. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our template and we're gonna use black acrylic paint on top of the silver. So if we do have something messed up somewhere, that we can also just cover it with our stenciling. So this area is still a little bit damp, so just for size reference, I'll put it down in a spot. Nope, that was also still damp. I got excited. All right, right about here, just so you can see sort of what this will look like. And it'll be basically perfectly aligned between, actually, it's going to be bigger than our black pieces. So we'll see how that goes. And you can see we've got our one holdout down here because it's a little bit curved, so it's not getting the full benefit of the fan. There we go. And then our overspray area up here. A few more spots. Because watching paint dry is exciting. So I've got a nice little fingerprint over here now because I touched it and it wasn't done being dry yet. And so part of the challenge when you're overspraying is that because it takes longer to dry, that the paint will still, it'll feel dry, but it'll still move a little bit. This was also designed with a miniature station in mind, so the cross breeze is ideal for things that are elevated. Do I have plenty of the Darcy patches available? I can. I make them as I get the orders in, and I have the thread, and I have the backing material. So yeah, sure. Something else while all this is drying, since it's taking longer than 3 minutes from the last one, because I got excited. We are still, we do have our Pride Anarchy collection on our Etsy shop right now, which is thegeekforge.etsy.com. And it is the Pride flags in the shape of the Anarchy symbol, both in patches and stickers. And we have a rainbow fire prop. We have a limited number of those, and all of the different, there are all the different colors, and it's a color changing light inside the fire prop, which is fun. So we do have that, and 15% of the profits will go to a local organization here in Atlanta, Lost and Found Youth, which helps homeless and disenfranchised LGBT plus youth. So yeah, so that is still going on, and yeah, that's the big thing. Aside from this, still have a couple of other projects. Still working on the Twi'lek headdress, and working on the Red Bull project, which is the Red Bull from Labyrinth? Last Unicorn. Sorry. Red Bull from Last Unicorn, because I've only seen it one time, and not the energy drink. And so I did 3D model it on my computer and then found out that wasn't exactly what I wanted and couldn't get it to print right. So now I'm going the old-fashioned way with clay. So we'll probably get back to that after we finish this project if you're interested in watching somebody work on a clay sculpture for hours on end. But either way, it's going to be a good time and I'm excited about it. So let's see how we're doing. All right, your spot down here is all dry now. And our overspray area is dry because I don't see any more fingerprints. Okay, so let's go ahead and turn off our fans. Then I'll give you an up close and personal look at what it looks like. All right, so this is our third layer. It's been pretty shiny and reflective. So, see, there we go. So see this sort of markings right here? This is where I kept spraying and it started moving our paint. So now we've got some of these wave sort of things going on here. So what we can do to fix this little boo-boo is going over to the place where the sandpaper lives in the garage. I didn't plan ahead to bring my sandpaper from my little corner of the garage, from the corner of the basement here. All right. So this is, I have no idea what grit this is, but it's very low. Oh, I've got a sanding block. All right. Perfect. So this is what this guy looks like. It's supposed to go on an electric sander. So we're gonna try and see what kind of sanding we've got left on here. So just very lightly in little small circles. Now this is also, and I purposefully did this right by our view window so that if it doesn't work out right, it'll just look like damage. So just small little circles there. And so what I've done is, oh, you can see that really good. See the part that looks like it's all scratched now? So that was using the sandpaper to get rid of those waves. So we are going to sort of focus on that when we do our next pass. And again, it's a light pressure with little small circle motion. So now we've done that. All of our discs. We're going to do in round 4. and let that next round dry. Now this is looking pretty good. There's still some of the brush strokes in there, but that's because I didn't sand it before I painted it. But I want to show you, after just a little bit of light sanding, sorry, I'm having some sort of allergy, what that'll look like with it being repainted. We still have our little dent down here because this was the scratch and dent section of the foam shop from TNT Cosplay is where we got our foam. And also where we got the plexiglass for the viewfinder, as well as the webbing. And because we didn't do any sort of overspray or anything like this, it should take only a couple of minutes to dry with the fans going. The other thing is, because we had the black base coat, that painting metallic colors are better when you have a black base underneath of them. It just makes them look better. It makes the colors more vibrant than if you've got a white base. I haven't really tried it with other bases, like a yellow base under a gold paint. So if anybody has, let me know. That would be interesting for me to try. But and you could have done a gray. So I chose to use the silver because I wanted this to be shiny and have a nice dichotomy between the matte black on the sides and the shine of the faux leather pieces, and then this looking very pristine except for the places where it's not, make it sort of a real artsy kind of statement. But using a matte gray would also be an awesome result. That the whole thing would just look like a matte piece. And by adding these extra textures of the trim around the edges and the plastic for the viewfinder, that it's going to give that illusion of being something that's not foam, which is kind of the point, right? Kind of the cool thing about doing cosplay and using foam pieces to make them look like metal, or some other material, or something that is not yet invented, or whatever the case may be. Is definitely a fun part for me to see what sort of things I can do. I have not done it to that level. However, I do have some of this color Rub and Buff. So we could definitely try to see how shiny we could get it. Maybe in parts. We'll get a couple of parts super shiny, and then some of the others looking real beat up, because obviously this is supposed to be a riot shield, and so it is something that is supposed to be used to defend yourself. So we don't want it to be looking pristine, right? We want it to look like it's not just off the shelf. Okay. So this looks, all right, nice and dry. Okay, so I'm going to turn off my fans, because you don't want to paint with the fans on, because then the paint just goes everywhere, which it already does because it's spray paint. It's got overspray, which you can see even all the way out here on our edges that it's still oversprayed. So here's our spot that we sanded before. So it's now got that uniform shine to it, like the rest of the piece. And see if I can get it so you can see it without knocking everything over. This is where we sanded. and it looks like nothing happened. So it was just a really light sanding. There's a couple of little scratches in there that if we wanted to do a second coat, that would totally take care of that. But I think we're going to declare victory on 4 coats at this point. So now that we know that this is nice and dry, the next thing we're going to do is take off our painter's tape. And we're definitely going to have to do some touch up, as you can see that I missed a couple of spots. But maybe we won't touch it up and maybe we'll leave it. See how we feel. Now I use just black acrylic so you can see all of my dirty fingerprints on there because I didn't seal it or anything else. There we go. There's the first one. And then here's our second side. So it's a little bit thinner, the middle piece is, than the reference photo kind of looks, but that's okay. So you can see on this side especially where it wasn't quite flat, and so we got some of this overspray in here. So also easy to fix. So we've got our chip brush here and our black paint, I thought. Yes, yeah, too many paint bottles. So this is what I used for this black paint color here, is just a black acrylic. Brand is Crafters acrylic, but you can use any kind of acrylic, doesn't matter. So first thing that I'm going to do is get me a piece of cardboard here. So just a little piece of a box top. And I'm going to put my paint onto my cardboard and use it like a palette, basically. All right. So we've got our paint on here. And the benefit to using palettes, either cardboard or a real palette, is that you can control the amount of black or paint in general. And when I did the first and second black layers on here, I just poured the paint directly onto the shield and made it because I didn't have to worry about it. Also, this will convert any dirty fingerprints that I've done in the last 45 minutes. Well, it's just like you're like drawing a circle. You just do short little straight lines until you have a circle. And then you don't have to be good at drawing circles, you have to be good at small straight lines. And of course, if you're good with your painter's tape, then this isn't required. And you notice I'm not using my big broad strokes technique here because I need more control over where the paint is going and where it's stopping. Is one of the downfalls to the chip brushes is that they do shed. Also, one of the benefits is that using the silver is that it's got, because it's got sort of that reflective layer on top, that if you do get a little overzealous with the painting, that you can wipe it off. Now, I would still recommend going nice and slow in your best rough impression. This is also where it comes in handy to paint using your whole arm instead of just your fingers or your wrist. Because just like drawing a straight line by drawing it where you intend it to go, you can use basically the leverage of the fact that your arm is straight and doesn't have a lot of bendiness to it to make those sort of straight strokes. And we do want to make sure to get a nice even coat, even on the places that didn't have any overspray or blemishes on them, because this is also serving as our final coat for this color. All right, that is one side done, and it will start to dry as we paint the other side, and then we'll turn the fans back on. I'm also not loading up my palette with a bunch of paint. It's just a little bit. And because you can always go back and get more paint, but if it starts spilling everywhere and stuff, then you've got a real problem. So you can always go back for seconds. I did a much better job with this side with my tape being pressed nice and flat. Another painting technique that I will sometimes employ is to lean my body as I'm painting instead of moving my arm. So you sort of move the arm stays still and you move at the torso instead. And that's just another way that you can help steady. And you'll notice that with the edging that we're doing, that we'll do the edge of the silver and the black first, and then go back through and paint away from our silver to the edges. This will also prevent us from painting over into the region that we don't want there to be black paint. And also, because we're going to be covering up our edges outside of the home with fabric trim, it's not quite as important that that area be covered. So it's not quite as important that area be covered as evenly. Is the entire sentence that I was trying to say. All right, so we have trimmed up our edges. We've got all of our second layer down, so we're going to turn our fans back on. Now, a more exciting time watching paint dry. But you can see on this side already that it was already starting to dry. So this is just going to speed up our process immensely. And especially with a thin layer of acrylic like this, it does not take long at all. The other thing to mention is, and I'm sure I mentioned it before, but if not, I'll mention it again. I'll do it anyway. So I like to ascribe to the 6 foot rule in cosplay, which means it just has to look good at 6 feet. This is not TV. This is not a big 40-foot screen where your thing is going to be shown, probably. So it's okay if there are some minor imperfections because you're the only one that's going to see it. Really, you're the only one that's going to notice that, oh, you can see my brushstrokes, or oh, I know that I did this thing wrong. And no one's going to know because nobody's going to know unless you're here with me watching me make all my mistakes and then fixing them. No one else is going to know what you did or didn't do. So don't stress about it too much if it's not perfect because we're not going for perfection, right? As my dad, who's a government employee, likes to say that it's close enough for government work. And I carry that with me always when I'm working on projects. That apparently, another one of my dad's sayings is you have to declare victory and move on with your life. So at some point, you have to decide this is good enough. So don't get too bogged down. Take a break. Put it up against a wall in the room, walk away, and come back in the room and look at it and see if it still bothers you. And if it still bothers you, then you can go back and fix it. But once you go, I'd like to go walk around the neighborhood, take a shower, something to just sort of cleanse my brain of whatever problem that I've been working on. And then go back and look at it, and you realize that it's not as bad as you thought it was because you've been staring at it. And it's up in your eyeballs. So, 6 feet, that's all it needs to look good at. And this is almost dry. So you can see in our secondary camera here. Let's see what we can do. And we have this really nice contrast with this shiny looking silver stripe down the middle and this matte black paint. Now we are going to seal it, which is very important so that it doesn't scratch or scuff as easily. My dad has some pretty good advice, especially for art related things. And, basic life stuff that you gotta be able to move on with yourself. All right, so here we go. So what we're gonna seal it with, after we do all our extra painting, any of our distressing, we're gonna distress it and then we're gonna seal it so that we don't get any unwanted distressing. And we're gonna use, again, a Rust-Oleum product. This is not sponsored by Rust-Oleum. I just buy all their products. This is a semi-gloss clear, so it is going to take a little bit of shine off of the silver. But we can do the rub and buff application after we've sealed it, and that will pop some of those spots again. All right, so this top side here is almost completely dry. You can see now the shiny parts of the black color are the parts that are still wet. So this is what we're going to be drying our color as right here, is this matte black finish. Oops, excuse me. All right, so it is 11, but I feel like we can go a little bit longer and at least get our stencil down. If y'all are down for running a little bit long today, then I am too. So I'll show you some of our imperfections that nobody else is going to notice by the time we're done. We still have the spot where our brush hair hung out. And so that looks sort of like a crack right now. So we're going to lean into that real hard. You can still see some of the brush strokes, but again, it is not a big deal. There is, no, all the fingerprints have been sprayed over, and I really want to draw attention to our little dent down here, which you can't even really see on the camera. See, there is the dent. There's our imperfection that was in the foam. You can see that nice contrast between our silver spray paint and our black acrylic paint. This also covered up if there was any of the white primer layer showing through. Now that's all been covered because we had a nice solid layer. And you can see it's almost dry. It's very exciting. Excuse me. All right, so while this is finishing up with its drying, let's take another look at our stencil. So right now, this is a full one piece, full one piece, a full piece, full sheet of paper. And so we added the little bars, I don't know what those thing you would call it, so that all of our little pieces that we wanted to keep in there will stay. So you see we've got the O has this little hyphen bar thing, and the R's in security services. So when I laid it down before, it looked like security services might overlap what we've done. So if that's the case, never fear, we have a solution. And we don't even have to reprint it and recut it or any of that stuff. So if it turns out that our stencil can't fit what we painted, because this is a learn as we go for everybody, that there is enough room on this stencil that we can cut security services off the bottom and rearrange it as we need to fit our project. All right, it's almost done. I want to make sure that up here gets dry because that's where we're going to be putting our stencil. And the bottom corners, it's not as big a deal. It can dry by itself. No, nothing there. Now, the technique that I'm planning to use for our stenciling is that we're going to use our chip brush again to put down a thin layer, and planning to use black and using the matte black on the bright silver as a stencil, I think will be a really nice contrast as well. And then we're going to take our paper towel and take up a bunch of paint. So the other way that you could definitely do this is with a sponge, and like a sponge that you use to clean the house, or one of those circular makeup or clay sponges, and use that in sort of a blotting technique. And that would also break up the paint. But this way we're going to make it look like it's faded and it's worn and that it's seen some use, which is the goal. Because that's really what makes a really nice way to make your cosplay have that extra sort of factor is the weathering and that sort of thing, so that it doesn't look like it just came off the shelf freshly painted. Unless, you're a fancy, fresh new RoboCop and you need everything to be shiny and new. In which case, you put a sealant on it that really like a triple gloss shine kind of thing. It's all the details. At least for me, I really like the detail work and how we can make it look different from whatever else might be going on or to complete whatever the rest of the costume is. So, all right, so we'll go ahead and turn off our fans so we can use our stencil. So we got a couple of spots that are still a little wet up in this area, but for the most part, we're good. So I'm going to take our stencil, and it's going to be right side up because we're going to be painting right on top. So here is what we've got right now. So it looks like what we're going to have to do is rework things just a little bit. Now I printed this at like 100% scale. So if you haven't printed this yet, you could scale it down maybe 80% and everything would be smaller, but all this would probably fit in one place. So I am going to, I know I saw scissors in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and cut the words out from underneath the shield here. And I'm going to be very careful to not cut the shield or the words. So we've got our shield. We're going to put that solid right there. Now we have these things. So I'm cutting between words, and we're going to be using our painter's tape again to tape everything down. Now I used regular copy paper. Cardstock will probably be better just because it's got more rigidity to it. Right? And then we're going to cut between the security and the surfaces. So, now that we've got that all cut out, put our thing here. And then we're going to figure out exactly how we want to place these. So I think, let's see here. So we can do something like this. We can also do something right down at the bottom. Or we might leave security services off altogether. Let's go ahead and leave it off for now. See how we feel. All right, yeah, handy dandy painter's tape. So what we're gonna do is gonna tape down our star, our shield here. We don't want to tape all the way, but I do want to get tape where there could potentially be some overflow. So we'll start with our shield. We also want to be gentle with our silver paint because it is not sealed yet. So if you happen to like stick a fingernail in it or something like that, that it is going to show. But all right. then we will just have a shield and the words Lone Star, so everybody knows the score. Okay, so I still have some paint left from when we finished up our edges. So I'm going to take a little bit on my brush here, and then I'm going to do two different things. I'm going to take my paper towel and yes, I assume that that's what you were saying, Kinder Mage, that we're going to leave off security services. All right, so I've got a bunch of paint off of here. There we go. Set that off to the side. We're going to take our brush here. Just going very slowly with my stencil in here. Again, a cardstock or a more rigid paper would definitely help, just because the copy paper will move around a lot. So I'm just going very lightly after I sort of wasn't quite stippling by those screw clips. All right, so we've got the general shape. Yeah, we absolutely could seal the silver and then do the stencilite for sure. The only reason that I'm not is because I want to seal all of it in one go and not have multiple layers of sealant on there. So that didn't quite work out the way that I had hoped, but it's not terrible. So let's see what we can do with that. All right. So I want a little bit more of the black on the little stripy bits on the side. So let's just go in straight with the paint. So I did not wipe any off of my brush this time. Because again, it's just paint. You can always paint over it. Also, I can make all the mistakes and you don't have to. So what I'm doing is I'm just loading up my brush with color on the edges of it. And then stippling down so we can get a more full coverage than what we had with our first pass there. could also do your stenciling with spray paint. In that case, you would want to tape off everything that you didn't want to be stenciled or that color. All right. So let's go ahead and turn our fans on and dry that off a little bit now before we pull the stencil off. You see the paper, it dries very quickly. Also, it depends on how polished you want it to look or how post-apocalyptic you would want something like this to look. The other option, if you have something like a Cricut or a silhouette machine or something like that, where you could actually cut out vinyl. So if I was trying to make this look really fancy and professional, that what I might do is use vinyl and use my cutter to cut the spile out and then put the vinyl on top of the paint. In which case, you'd absolutely want to seal your paint first before you put the stickers on top. Because that's basically all there are, stickers. All right. Just a little bit here. You ready for the big reveal? That looks much cooler. Okay. Let's go ahead and scratch that now. All right. So we're going to do the same thing for Lone Star underneath it. Let's see, we've got a couple of, a little bit of black paint here. That up just a little bit. And take our tape. Trying to center it as best I can. And then I'm going to tape down the edges because these are such small pieces. So we've got a nice little box here. then just for spacing, you just use the width of the painter's tape to space it out underneath.